We hear this all the time nowadays. You need to gain this type of information and that type of information this, information that. So there is some kind of obsession with information which is justified. But there's a very important distinction that people often miss when it comes to information, which is the difference between information and knowledge. And there's a lot of practical points to actually extract from this. So today in this video, we're going to actually discuss that specific distinction and see how we can actually apply it to all different domains of life. So a good way to begin to conceptualize this distinction between knowledge and information is to think about knowledge as acquaintance through experience and context of the real world, let's say, which is subject to different private contexts that cannot actually be conveyed, as opposed to information, which is almost the raw piece of data that we actually integrate into our knowledge. Another aspect of this distinction is that knowledge keeps reinventing itself because it's subject to a lot of variables that are implicit or subconscious, let's say. So knowledge is subject to personality traits, temperaments, the context of the day, the context of the time and place, and all these different variables, as opposed to information, which is almost the raw piece of communication. So knowledge is very much contextual and it keeps reinventing itself based on the specific context it's in. But information is almost the raw piece of data, let's say, that keeps integrating itself into the knowledge. So one practical implementation we can actually extract from this perspective we actually discussed about the distinction, we can say that in order to integrate information into our knowledge base, let's say, you can think of the knowledge as the bucket, which is subject to context and all the other variables we mentioned. And then you have the information flowing into that bucket. In order to make the information flow into that bucket, we have to subjugate that information to different contexts. So if I'm learning, let's say I'm reading a new book, I have to constantly apply the book to different contexts. I have to speak about it. I have to write summaries about it. So subjugating that piece of information to different contexts of the real world, instead of just taking it as raw data, let's say, would actually integrate it into my knowledge bucket much better. So the distinction is very much helpful when it comes to learning new things, let's say, because as you're progressing through your learning process, so you can think about it as taking the raw information, just like that, reading, for example, wouldn't actually do you very much. You have to take that piece of information and try to subjugate it to the context of the real world in order to add it to that bucket of knowledge, which is constantly reinventing itself through, let's say, creativity, human personality, the context, the subconscious, and all these different things. Now, what I want to say is that this distinction is not always and universally useful. Sometimes they can be used interchangeably, but for this specific, I guess, implementation of that distinction, we can think about it as something that enhances our approach towards learning, if that makes sense. So this was our discussion for today. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.